only one person thinking of running has gone face-to-face with Prime Minister Netanyahu, had the strength to say to a person face-to-face, what you are doing is going to lead to not only the political isolation of Israel, but an ongoing endless war and conflict.
This is What It Takes from Unmoderated News. I'm Sarah McCammon. In part 2 of our interview, Rahm Emanuel talks frankly about Israel, a country he believes in with a government he sharply critiques. Ambassador Emanuel grew up with a strong Jewish identity and spent summers in Israel as a child. With views on Israel dividing his party, he has thoughts on how Democrats should be navigating this moment. We spoke in Chicago.
It's interesting what you say about places of worship. I mean, maybe you're talking broadly about community, but we live in an increasingly secular country. Fewer and fewer people are going to church, synagogue, mosque, attending some kind of religious congregation.
And more people are looking for spiritual meaning. So while attendance may be down, and you're not wrong, more people are searching for spiritual and communal meaning. And I wouldn't be sitting in front of you if it wasn't for my own Jewish education at both temple and at home. Something that Amy and I have tried to replicate. I happen to think, and if you go into different parts of this city, not here on the north side, not far from where we live, the church and the places of worship are most important anchors of that community's stability. And so I believe, while I believe in the separation of the church and state, and as I like to say, there's a difference between the pulpit and the podium, there is a place for spiritual grounding of a child and religious and moral grounding for a child, and not be scared of talking about that.
Do you think that loss of religious identity is a loss for the country, for the society?
Well, it's definitely a loss for an individual. You can choose to be secular, but that's a choice. That's not wrong. It's not wrong. But you make that choice later in life. And there are people that, look, I have to take it from my own journey. Grew up in a very identified Jewish family. Could say that after my bar mitzvah falling out, and I'll tell you a very funny story. Found it again as I had children. And I'm not as good as I should be as a Jew. So I'll tell you this one. I think it's a funny story. So Mayor Khan of London gets elected. And I call him to congratulate him. And he goes, I really want to come to Chicago. I've been watching what you're doing. Love to do it. I'm laughing before the punchline. So when he comes to America, his first visit is the city of Chicago. But he's the first Muslim. I'm the first Jew. Chicago and London, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to him, why don't we can do something interfaith or whatever. We worked out he would come to my synagogue with me. I go to a modern Orthodox, or our family does. So we attend Saturday. We go to synagogue. And the rabbi says at the service, welcoming our two distinguished honored guests, but we want to specifically recognize Mayor Khan from London because he's done something that nobody's ever figured out how to do. And it's his first time in a synagogue. And he goes, you figured out how to get Rahm here on a Saturday, and we haven't been able to do it in 60 plus years. And every time I talk to Mayor Khan, he keeps reminding me, he wants to, have you made it to synagogue on Saturday? He's raised his children to be devout, observant Muslims. We both, his two fathers, him Muslim, me Jewish, talked about how to raise our kids to be both receptive to other cultures, but also confident in their own faith and your children will make their own choice. But I don't ever regret raising the kids having a spiritual and religious education, because I think it's morally helps them, guide them. And I'm so far at 29, 28, and 27, we haven't screwed up yet, but there's always another day.
I know it. If I could ask you a couple more questions about your Jewish identity. Your father was born in Israel.
Correct.
You grew up spending time there, summers there, I think.
Yeah.
How did those experiences shape you?
that's just a piece of it. I mean, I grew up a lot. So a day after the 6-Day War, we went. Mom took the 3 boys.
1967.
Yeah. 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 73. But that's a piece of it. Probably the most kind of searing seminal identity. When we were growing up, in our family room was my grandmother's, on my mother's side, purse, red purse. And above it was her passport and my 2 great aunts, Auntie Ida and Auntie Giddy. And it was their passports and that purse that carried their passport from Moldova to America. And on either side of it was the black and white photos of mom and dad's relatives, our great aunts, great uncles, etc., that we never met, never made it to America. And it was mom and dad's constant reminder that you are very fortunate. You have won the lottery ticket of life being born here in America. You have relatives who never made it. So while spending summers in Israel, the whole summer, was very formative, probably the most searing thing was having 28 eyeballs stare at you. It's been the impetus, the motivator. I happen to think being born in America is winning the lottery ticket of life, and which is why you try to give back. It's one of the things that Amy and I have tried to raise with our kids. Every Friday night, growing up, we had a Sabbath dinner. And if somebody had, like me, soccer game, or somebody else had something else, the dinner was held until you came home. And you were home Friday night. You may have dinner at 9 o'clock, but that's when family dinner happened because of the Sabbath. And so that's how, and the trips there were very, very influential. I remember the first trip, 1967, I'm 8 years old. We're steary-eyed. We get off a plane. And let me back up a little. My dad, being an immigrant, had just come to America in 1959. His only stock he had was in McDonald's. He sells it all so that the kids could go to Israel. We go with mom. He had to stay and work. And we get off the plane. I mean, remember, I'm 8 years old. Zeke is 10. Ari is 7'6". And we hadn't slept. And rather than go to our aunt's house, where we're going to stay for the summer, mom drags us off Ben Gurion Airport straight to Yad Vashem, the museum for the Holocaust. We hadn't been in the country 2 hours. We get through security, or at that time through immigration. We're driving straight to Yad Vashem to see the museum of the Holocaust.
How did that hit you as a?
Well, I mean, I don't fully. I mean, I've done it. Look, yesterday, the whole the 2 elders were here. Zach's in town for something. There's an exhibit at the Museum of Science and Industry, a touring Anne Frank exhibit, and I said we're all going to go as a family and stuff like that. So, that old phrase by Mark Twain. At 12, I concluded my father was a fool. By 21, I was shocked what he learned in only 8 years. So it hit you because it's the same thing as the war. I mean, there's no one individual thing. It's a continuation of a theme about your identity, who you are, your moral foundation, and your responsibility.
We're in a moment when Israel policy is an increasingly controversial and divisive issue, particularly in the Democratic Party. And also a moment where there are maybe more Jewish Democrats than ever in high-profile positions being talked about as potential 2028 contenders, including yourself. How do you think Jewish Democrats should be navigating this moment?
Well, one is a couple things I would say. I slightly disagree. It's the challenge is generational, not party. Well, I know you're talking to me about as a Democrat, but if you look at it, data's pretty clear. Anybody under the 30 in both parties, whether they're or 3 parties, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or Independents, have a negative view of Israel. This last 3 years, over 1,000 days, will be a seminal definition for the state of Israel across the United States and across the globe, as the 6-Day War was when I just told you what happened when I grew up. And I don't think the American Jewish community, I don't think the state of Israel has fully put their heads around that. It's one of the reasons I've accepted this invitation by Tel Aviv University to go give a speech in July on the status of U.S.-Israel relationships. And I'm going to give a major speech and a Q&A for an hour with the students and the professors there. 2, it's interesting, you say it's the most challenging, and that I joke, when you look at Governor Shapiro, Governor Pritzker, myself, etc., we're just 7 away from a minion. So
that is enough bar mitzvah Jews to have a service, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. I shouldn't assume. As I relate to American politics, and I say this, if my faith is your problem, you shouldn't vote for me, because I'm not abandoning it. It's who I am. It's my moral, ethical, and educational foundation. And 2, for a party built on the notion of inclusive, I wouldn't exactly start adopting exclusive. 3, more importantly, don't worry about my faith. Worry about the fact that Americans have lost faith with America. That's what our project is. And if my faith is a barrier for you, you shouldn't vote for me. And I'm good with that. You need to ask yourself some questions. But the faith that from the classroom to any topic I'm talking about, is that the American people, when you ask me, go back to our first question, what's ailing America is that the Americans have lost faith in America, that it will be here for them, for their kids. That's the faith we have to work on. And my faith, and I'll get things right, I'll get things wrong if I decide to run, just like being mayor, just like being chief of staff. Hopefully more right than wrong. My faith will be one of the guiding moral compasses. And I'm okay. And I think that I would also say to you, we're in my old congressional district. This used to be known as the Polish district seat. Dan Rosenkowski, Roman Buczynski, Frank Annunzio, Rob Blagojevich, Mike Flanagan, Mike Quigley. Guess who doesn't fit? Rahm Emanuel. Yet, when I ran against a Polish woman, this district voted for me. The Jewish community makes up only 2% of the city of Chicago.
And less than that nationwide, or about the same.
Yeah, but it's not New York, it's not LA. And, the mayor was always identified as quote unquote an Irish Catholic position. And there were ugly moments in it. As there was for Congress. And the city voted twice. And when I was ambassador, somebody on our fence sprayed Nazi insignia. Another neighbor, unbeknownst to me, the next day cleaned it all up, knowing I was out of the country. So I have been both the victim of anti-Semitism in both races, of both explicit and implicit anti-Semitism, and I have also been the beneficiary of people making a judgment on my character and my ability to get a job done for them. So I do agree there's a big challenge, but I think sometimes you shortchange where I think the American people can be.
But what about the question of Israel policy? I mean, you have...
Well, that's a larger question, and I'm not avoiding it. Look, on Israel policy, I've been upfront, as you know. Now, I hate to say this to everybody else. Only one person thinking of running has gone face-to-face with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And the argument I had with him when I was President Obama's chief of staff was over housing in the West Bank. I'm sorry for everybody that's late to this. Some of us were not only early to this, but vocal about it. Had the strength to say to a person face to face, what you are doing is going to lead to not only the political isolation of Israel, but an ongoing endless war and conflict. If I wanted to be wrong about one prediction, that is the prediction I wish I was wrong about. Now, I said it to his face, was strong about it, strong for the President Obama, and helped encourage this decision in a very vocal way. The early funding for the Iron Dome comes from President Obama. Was in the room when we made that decision. I think it was the right thing to do for Israel's defense. But the idea that you're going to do what you're doing on the West Bank will end in endless conflict. That's why. Now, I also would say, look, there's three things over the last 30 years Israel tried. There's working and negotiating with established states. Jordan, peace, was there with President Clinton in Gulf of Aqaba, or in Aqaba, for the signing. 79, Egypt, peace. Abraham Accords, peace, established states. Israel unilaterally moves out of Gaza and Lebanon, and you got Hezbollah and Hamas. Then they've tried this divorce from the West Bank. Only one of the three tactics has worked. Establishment. That's why I think there's an opportunity working with the Lebanese government. And your choice is not either just peace or unilateral, but working with partners, which is why I've said, given the politics and where we are, a 23-state solution, not a 2-state. That if Israel and the Palestinians come up with an agreement recognizing the Palestinian sovereignty and desires and aspirations, within also and meeting and addressing Israel's security concerns, all 21 nations that make up the Arab League will recognize and have diplomatic relations with Israel. That fulfills Ben-Gurion's a nation among nations. So I understand that, having been there early on in Oslo Accords, et cetera, the 2-state solution, I know where the politics are today. I know what Israel's done. I know what the Palestinians are. And remember, I don't walk away from this giving a pass to the Palestinians like a lot of voices in America. Months after the Oslo Accord, they have an agreement. They're blowing up buses in Jerusalem and Dizengoff. In Camp David, under President Clinton, they get 90% of what they were asking for, and they say no. 7 years later, under President Bush and Prime Minister Olmert, they get the same 98%. They say no. I can understand why the Israeli public is cynical, and I happen to think the Palestinian PLO leadership is not worthy of the Palestinian people. They have desires and interests that are legitimate, and they have been corrupted. Look at the head Abbas right now is 80 plus years old, and he's trying to install his son. It's a corrupt operation, and all the Arab League has used it as a slogan and not done their work. So this is not just on Israel. The Arab League has a role to play to stand up a legitimate Palestinian authority that would be a real partner for Israel. So that's why I say it's not just a critique, and it's not just Israel. It's 23-state solution that actually changes the political dynamics in the region.
But as you noted, public opinion is worse than it's been maybe ever in a very long time.
Now this is part of the critique. It's a piece of the critique of the Prime Minister. Israel is more militarily secure than ever and more politically and diplomatically isolated than ever. Your scientists cannot go to international conferences. Your cultural institutions cannot participate in international events. You've lost the European public opinion. You've lost America's public opinion. And in the last year, you picked up Somaliland. That is not a trade you should be doing. So does the military offer you some opportunity? Yes. And my critique of the Prime Minister is the fact that you've never used the political and diplomatic levers to make the most of your strategic opportunities. Classic example of this is now Lebanon. You have a state which has probably the best government in 30 years. They worked out some deal with you as it relates to the natural gas and oil off Israel's coast and Lebanon's coast. They too want to get rid of Hezbollah. They can't do everything on their own. But this is a state nation government. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, others are interested in making it stand up so it doesn't become, as I would say, Iran is a vulture on failed states. That's why they lost in Syria. They try to set up Hezbollah as a state within a state of Lebanon. This is an opportunity. And you have to make the most of this and exert your military cannot do what your diplomatic and your political strategy. And the Prime Minister, over the life of his public career, has never exerted himself diplomatically the way he has asked the IDF to exert themselves militarily.
I do want to go back to U.S. politics. You got your start as a political strategist. Mm-hmm. You've been an elected official and a strategist. You kind of have a unique perspective with both sides. So I want to pick your brain a little bit more about the future.
Can I say one thing?
Of
Don't
course.
Forget the question. I just finished your summer reading list.
Okay.
We do. There's a great book called Boss Lincoln.
Boss Lincoln.
Yeah, I just read it just about 2 books ago. And it's about Lincoln just as a political player. And, I've read that about Roosevelt, just finished one about Teddy. Politics is not far from policy.
True enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll put it on the list.
Okay. You'll enjoy it.
You said earlier.
If not, I'll buy you the book.
You can send it to me.
Okay.
You said earlier that you think one of the fundamental divides in politics right now is between sort of the elite.
Yeah. I said establishment versus anti-side. That's more of a kind of through line.
Right. Versus left, right.
Yeah.
You're seen as a moderate. I think you've proudly worn that label of a moderate centrist pragmatist.
A raging one, yeah. A very aggressive moderate, not a passive, thoughtful one.
Which is kind of what I want to ask you about. I mean, I think there is a perception that moderates are kind of, for lack of a better word, boring, willing to compromise.
No, milquetoast is, I think, the word. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think, it's so well, first of all, it's not my personality. Nobody walks away and goes, there's weak and woke or gray. I'm not gray. Let me attack not the temperament, but the policy description. As I told you earlier, and this is why I think the labels are stupid. First city to do free community college. Left, center, or progress? As I always say to the progressives that think I'm too moderate, the first 8 letters of progressive is progress, not perfection. Okay? I created universal kindergarten and universal pre-K, full day. Never existed in Chicago. Progressive, moderate, or progress? I did raise the minimum wage. Moderate, left, or progress? It's not perfection. And I can go down the list. We did things on our mass transit system, our libraries, et cetera. Go down the list of what we did. The first line we built or rebuilt was Red Line South in the city of Chicago. And all 12 miles of it, on time and on budget. And we raised our affirmative action set aside for women and minority-owned businesses higher. Left, center, moderate, progressive? No. So to me, these categories don't matter. The question is, are you moving forward? Are you growing? And are more people part of that growth? That's the standard you have. Now, second is, and this gets to, as you say, temperament. I joke I'm not weak or woke, but the reality is I'm neither weak or woke. No interest group that's ever gotten in the arena with me did not walk out without a broken nose. When President Clinton wanted to create health care for 10 million uninsured children to take on the insurance companies, I got the bat and ball. When he wanted somebody to create an assault weapon ban and take on the NRA, I got the bat and ball. When President Obama wanted to take on the financial industry and reform banking and insurance or the healthcare and taking on that, I got the bat and ball. And when I came to the city of Chicago, when it came to reforming our school system, it came to reforming our bureaucracy that was only working for interests that weren't for the taxpayers or the recipients of those services, I took on the bat and ball. Okay, so my view is everybody gets a seat at the table as long as you understand that the status quo is not working. And we're going to make fundamental reforms. And then the test of leadership is, do you know why you're doing what you're doing? And then do you have the strength to get it done? When you look at your most successful presidents or governors, they had a vision, an understanding, and then the capacity to see it through. And so to me, my temperament is what it is. I don't think I don't buy the categories left versus center or moderate versus far left. I buy, does it fulfill the first 8 letters of progressive, which is progress? And free community college did.
And you can't make progress without power.
No, now to go through no, I say that like that with my voice rising to a 13-year-old young man tone. But it's interesting. The Democrats, a couple things. Democrats become averse to power post Lyndon Johnson. It's just it's a DNA. They flinch, they get into cold sweats, whatever it is. They hate it. They hate power. I think one of the problems, and if you look at President Clinton and President Obama, one of the problems again, I'm a category I hate, but the criticism that comes from the party, mainly from the left for both of them, because they were very comfortable with power. Differently, in different ways, but exercising it. And I think that you can, if you have great ideas, great. But if you don't know how to get it done, not interested. So, Boss Lincoln or all the other things that I've read is merging both the kind of the policy goal you have and the power to see it through. Now, take Social Security, one of the great programs the Democrats create. One, if you go through the history, why does Roosevelt announce this? He needs it in the 36th reelection because he's worried about Huey Long. He needed a retirement plan. Two, his Social Security plan, because he wanted to pass it explicitly prevents African Americans, based on the kind of work they do, from participating. And it takes Truman to make it happen. Today, there's a lot to criticize of Roosevelt. I think Roosevelt's a great president. I happen to also think his internment in Japanese was really, really a blemish on his record. I think his refusal to bomb Auschwitz and the rail lines going into the death camps is a blemish. I happen to think he's also one of the greatest presidents we ever had, and that's life.
We're almost out of time, but I want to ask you one more question.
Okay, here it goes.
As we've noted, you've worn a lot of hats.
Yeah.
Congressman, mayor, ambassador, strategist. You've done a lot of things in your career, right?
Yeah.
What else do you want to achieve?
Yeah. Well, first of all, and this is not just to be cute and like a jerk, but it will come off that way. The biggest title I have is father. If I start talking, I'll start crying. All three of the kids have done unbelievable. And now, I want to be clear. Each and every one of them I wanted to kill 5 or 6 times, literally strangle them. That said, that's the most important title, and that title never changes. Never. I'm not interested in titles. You probably know, I have enough titles to fill 3 Wikipedia pages. I don't care. And if I decide to take this next level, it's not about, I don't need another title. The question is, can I change what I think is the most important thing? That America has been and has become both complicit and complacent with its failure. I don't believe in that America. I don't think Americans believe in that America. Now, it is going to be a rough road. Tough times require a tough leader. Title, not interested. I got a 5-step plan for what I think is economic growth. I happen to think redistribution is wrong. I happen to think the crony capitalism and corruption of Donald Trump is wrong. 1, best educated workforce. 2, double our research and development and scientific research. Laid out a plan specifically for that. 3rd, solve immigration, which is why I've endorsed the Dignity Act. It's both reflects that we're a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants, and we're going to respect both and not violate one. The 4th thing I'll do is a full investment and a discussion. I'm going to lay this out on our energy of both generation and distribution. You can't have a 21st century economy on a 20th century foundation. And finally, a tax and fiscal policy that is sustainable. Today, the tax policy rewards wealth preservation, not wealth creation. When you really read what Mitt Romney wrote about, in the end of the day, he identified both through step-up basis, capital gains, that family foundation, and giving rather charitable donations. We're basically rewarding wealth preservation. A classic example. I'm basically being incentivized through the tax code to set up my kids financially. Are you kidding me? They get what I got, a loving home and a good education and a big hit on the back of your head. But I'm basically the tax code. If I don't take advantage of it, I'm a chump. This is insane. So those are the 5 things that grow the economy, grow jobs, and invest in people, and invest in this country. And
paths for people whose parents don't have those resources.
Yeah, I think education is the cornerstone of that. I've made that clear. If you think you're going to be a superpower in 20 years on 50% of your kids not reading, good luck with that. You'll just basically take it in the face from 3,000 years of human history. Nobody has ever, as a civilization, succeeded based on failure. Never. Okay, so that's to me, and again, I want to say that if you ask me, like being mayor, there's not a week that goes by that I don't run into a young man or woman who's told me I went to college for free. It wasn't the title mayor. It was the fact that I gave him a chance. And I used my political capital against a lot of interest groups in Chicago that didn't want to see it. That, to me, is what matters. If I was to run for this office, and after I walked out, that we basically cut in half our failure on reading, I'd have said, job well done, check. That goes in the positive column.
Mayor, ambassador, father of three, Rahm Emanuel.
Don't kid yourself. You got two. You'll know that's the single biggest scorecard.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Hey,
thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much.